Let me tell you something I had to learn the hard way. Not in a day. Not in a week. But through years of carrying a heavy heart, without even realizing it. Holding on to resentment doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make you wiser. It only weighs you down, slowly, quietly, deeply. There were mornings I woke up, and it felt like I was carrying a bag of stones inside my chest. No one could see it. But it pulled me down, in every glance, in every word, in every tired breath. I used to believe that holding on to pain would protect me from being hurt again. That if I refused to forgive, they wouldn't be able to come back into my life. But the truth is, that pain didn't protect me from anything. It only kept me trapped in the same old story, replaying scenes I should have let go of long ago. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's not pretending it didn't hurt. It's telling yourself, I don't want to live through that again. Forgiveness is a kind of freedom, quiet and brave. And if you've been carrying something heavy for too many years, then maybe today is the day you let yourself put it down. Just a little. Just enough to say, I don't need to carry this anymore. Some kinds of anger don't make a sound. They don't scream. They don't cry. They just stay, quietly, inside you. Like a silent river that's been flowing under your skin for years. You don't talk about it anymore. But every time you remember, your heart tightens. You don't bring it up in conversation. But you still lose your breath when someone says something that sounds like the past. When resentment stays too long, it stops being fire and becomes distance. Between you and the people you love. Between you and yourself. Between you and the little joys you used to welcome. You smile politely. You do what's expected. But some part of you no longer trusts. And the saddest part is, you've stopped trusting yourself. Trusting that you can be fully loved. That you can live without always being on guard. That you can open your heart and not be hurt all over again. There was a long stretch of time when I lived with the quiet belief that I had every right to be angry. I wasn't treated with respect. I was hurt. I had endured more than anyone around me could see. And so I told myself, I deserve to feel this way. If they won't change, then I don't need to forgive. I guarded my emotions with firmness. And I called it strength. But here's what I didn't realize. In holding on to that rightness, I was also holding on to some of my heaviest emotions. I started to look at others with doubt. I stopped believing in kindness. I became harder on the people around me. And then, harder on myself. Resentment may begin as protection. But when it stays too long, it becomes a callus on the heart. You forget how to soften. You forget how to forgive. Not just others, but the tender parts of yourself, too. When you hold on to something for too long, it doesn't just stay there, quietly. It begins to change you. You don't laugh as easily. You pull back when someone comes close. You sit in a room full of people, but feel like you're not really part of it. There are things you think you've gotten over. But really, you've just buried them so deeply that even you can't see how much they still hurt. And then, that anger. It stops being about one person, one story. It starts spilling into everything else. You get impatient with your children, irritated at work, distant with friends, cold toward yourself. The cost of carrying something too long is that you stop living fully in the present. You're reacting to the past, but it's the present that pays the price. And the saddest part is, sometimes, the person who hurt you has long forgotten. But you're still carrying it. Still aching. Day after day. One day, I was sitting quietly in my familiar kitchen. Just the ticking of the clock, and sunlight slipping through the curtain. And suddenly, I felt tired. Not because of anyone else, but because of me. No one was hurting me anymore. No one was saying the kind of words that cut deep. So why was I still aching? Then it hit me. I was still replaying everything. In my head, in my chest, in the way I breathed. I was still telling the old story. But this time, not to anyone else. To myself. Every time I thought about it. Every time I blamed myself for not fighting back. Or for letting them treat me that way. I was opening the wound again. No one else was still there to hurt me. But I was still living with the pain. Every day. The turning point didn't come from an apology. It didn't come from a conversation. It came from a small question I asked myself. Softly, honestly. How long will I keep hurting myself? After everything I'd told myself. About them. About me. About who was right or wrong. There was one question I had never thought to ask. Am I tired? Not tired of them. Not tired of the past. But tired of carrying it all for this long. There were nights I lay completely still. In a warm and quiet room. But inside, I felt cold. As if I were far away from myself. Not because the pain was still sharp. But because I had never let it rest. I never allowed myself to put it down. Not even for a moment. And maybe that's where forgiveness begins. Not in words. Not in answers. But in a single breath. A pause. A moment of stillness. Where you don't have to figure anything out. You just get to breathe. I used to think that forgiving someone meant saying the pain wasn't real anymore. That it didn't hurt. That I was fine now. And because I wasn't fine, I told myself, I'm not ready. There were still quiet storms inside me. So I waited. Waited for the peace to come first. Before I allowed forgiveness. But after sitting with myself for a long time, I realized something simple. Forgiveness doesn't begin when you're calm. It doesn't wait for the pain to disappear. It begins in a different kind of moment. When you're tired of carrying it all. When you no longer want to retell the story. When you stop replaying every detail. Not because you don't remember. But because you're too tired to hold it anymore. Forgiveness isn't a conclusion. It's a clearing. A quietness inside. That rises when you're done fighting the past. It's not giving them another chance. It's giving yourself one. To keep living. Unbound by something. That will never change. Now that we've come this far. I want to ask you something. Gently. Are you tired? Not tired of anyone else. Just tired of holding on to things that no longer help you. Things you carried to protect yourself. But that only weigh you down. And if you are, then come with me. Let's begin to set it down, just a little. We don't need to do anything big. We don't need to let go all at once. I started by writing. One imperfect sentence in a journal no one would ever read. Sometimes, just 3 words. I am tired. On some days, I'd take a deep breath. And whisper inside. I don't want to think about this anymore. Not because I had forgotten. But because I had had enough. And I wanted to save my strength. For the things still ahead. Letting go doesn't have to mean perfect forgiveness. It can simply mean no longer holding so tightly. Just softening. Just giving your heart a little room to breathe. There's something I did for a very long time. I waited. I waited for them to realize they had hurt me. I waited for an honest apology. I waited for change. For one moment. When they might come back and say, I was wrong. And you know what? I waited so long. I forgot what I was even waiting for. I just knew my heart felt emptier each day. I thought that once they understood, the weight would lift. But eventually, I realized, some people will never understand. Not because they're cruel, but because they've never learned how to look that deep. Or because they've already moved on, while I was still standing there. And if I kept waiting, the only one staying stuck would be me. Letting go, for me, didn't begin with an apology. It began with a decision. To stop waiting. To stop waiting for someone to see. To stop needing proof that my pain was real enough to earn peace. To stop waiting for someone else to give me permission to breathe again. I gave that to myself. Me. There wasn't a grand moment. No background music. No one stood up and clapped. It was just an ordinary day. And I realized I didn't feel hurt anymore when I thought about what happened. Not because I forgot, but because I no longer wanted to carry it. I didn't need to explain it again. Didn't need to prove who was right or wrong. Didn't need to hold on to something my heart had already outgrown. And then something unexpected happened. I started hearing birds in the morning. I felt the warmth of sunlight through my window. I had enough calm in me to make a cup of tea slowly, without feeling empty. Freedom didn't arrive with fireworks. It came as a quiet breath. A slow meal. A day when I no longer had to brace myself, just to get through. And I realized, peace isn't about never hurting. It's when you stop fighting the hurt. Have you ever felt weak just because you chose to forgive? Have you ever forgiven someone and then gotten angry at yourself for it? Wondered, am I letting them hurt me all over again? I have. More than once. I've felt guilty, like I was betraying myself, just because I no longer wanted to stay angry. But here's what I've come to understand. Every time I held on to that anger, I wasn't protecting anyone. I was only making my own heart more tired. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about agreeing with what happened. It's not about pretending the pain wasn't real. Sometimes, forgiveness is nothing more than a soft whisper. I want to stop here. I don't want to carry this pain into every conversation, every morning, every part of my future. You don't have to explain why you chose peace. You only need to remember this. Choosing peace has never been something to feel ashamed of. For a long time, I wrestled with one quiet question. If I forgive them, what do I do when I see them again? Should I smile like nothing happened? Should I pretend we're fine? Do I have to say something to prove I've moved on? I used to think that truly letting go meant being soft with them, kind, maybe even welcoming again. But eventually, I came to a gentler truth. That forgiveness doesn't mean inviting them back. It doesn't mean you owe them warmth. You can forgive and still choose not to speak. Still keep your distance. Still walk past them, like two people who once shared a path, but no longer need to walk it together. Forgiveness isn't about performing kindness. It's just a quiet way of telling your own heart, that story is over. I no longer need to carry it, but I still have the right to protect my peace. You can say hello or not. You can smile or stay silent. You can be at peace without being close. Forgiveness is for you. Distance, too, can be something sacred that you choose to keep. If someone asked me, "What do you wish you had known sooner?" I don't think I'd answer with a lesson. I'd probably just talk about the years I spent waiting for an apology, blaming myself for being too soft, lying awake at night, replaying the same story, like a film I couldn't turn off. And then maybe I'd say, I wish someone had told me that peace doesn't arrive after everything makes sense. It comes when you stop needing it to. I wish someone had said that forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It simply makes you lighter and protects the softest parts of you from being reshaped by anger. That sometimes letting go doesn't need a reason. It only needs a quiet hope. I want to keep living. Not perfectly, not without pain, but with a heart that's still warm. If you've stayed with me until now, I just want to say something very small. Thank you. Not for listening to a lesson, but for giving yourself this pause, this quiet moment to reflect on something you may have carried for far too long. Forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a path. And sometimes, just taking one softer step is already an act of great courage. You don't have to forgive everything today. You don't have to forget. Just remember, every time you choose to let go of a little bit, you become a little lighter for yourself. And if one day you need a place to return to, a soft voice, or just a quiet reminder that you don't have to be strong all the time, I'll be here. Heart of Calm will always be ready to sit beside you, even in the silence of an ordinary evening, so you can breathe. And so you'll know you're not alone.